to be fair.
Let's talk about 40K today. I don't have all my cool stuff. I have to go with not cool stuff, but I'm ready
You
to talk.
with the tried and true. There's got to be innovation, Brad. Come on.
Well, I mean, I did travel to a different country, so I feel like I get a little bit of a little leeway for having not my setup. Does that work? But I am ready. So you need to
You're,
pan the camera down or stand up very straight, Mr. Siegs. We're looking at like 2/3 of your face.
I'm panning it down. I don't know what John is doing with the camera, but
he
no,
just he just
pretty.
needs to needs to have his sultry smoky eyes looking into the camera. That's all he wants.
He just wants you looking at these Creek guardsmen. That's it. Nothing else exists.
It is exactly. It's a Sieg forehead. Exactly. I go to a different country. They go, Canada doesn't count. It's still a different country, guys. Go on. I mean, just now because I'm the Prime Minister of Canada, I apparently have to ride a moose while drinking maple syrup to seal the deal on getting my Prime Minister status.
Well, you just won in Canada, right? Tell us about this tournament. Give us some context.
It was good stuff, man. The good props to Dustin and all those guys. Also got a set of terrain from them. They had it was well run. They had 103, 104. They had 100 and something. It was over 100, but less than 110. How about that? Amount of players. All the guys, most of the guys from Team Canada were up there. Welcome. And they had a well-run deal. They had really good terrain. I like the terrain a lot. It was a little, they were running the WTC FAQ, but they did change a few things, which did make the game significantly different because they did not use the ability to fight in walls like the WTC does. And we had some larger terrain, like pieces like inches thick, but they had like larger pieces to go through and some doorways and stuff. But they ran a 6 game event, and it was very very nice. To tell you the truth, I would come back to Canada. This is my first Canadian tournament. You guys broke ground over here before me, way before me, a couple of years ago actually. And
Yeah, at this point.
but where I liked it a lot. I give him props. I loved it. I'm staying in Mr. Richard's house. Mr. Robert Gustafsson came down from Sweden. I guess it would be down and way over from Sweden. So we had an international crowd in the old Canada. So it
Right.
was good times, man.
Now you
Through
played against Mr. Scary himself. There was an Art of War showdown at this
I was
tournament.
just about to say I played. Scary actually picked me up because, as usual, my feeble physique was my old man body was feeling very poor after 4 games on day one. I came into day two, and Scary psyched me up. We had an Archon on Archon match, but he just doesn't know that I'm actually ancient evil because I'm that old. He couldn't, and I was able to sneak it out. I had enough tricks up my sleeve to pull that game out. So I ended up playing. What did I play? I go in order. I went Space Wolves, Admech, Orcs, Blood Angels, Drakari on Chari, Hot Drakari on a Drakari, and Grey Knights in the finals.
Were any of the games particularly close besides the one against Scary?
They were really tough. The Admech game was very, very tough. I went first on battle lines, and we had done player place terrain,
Hmm.
and I was able to move up and just kind of sit on the objectives. And I knew playing against Admech that the Admech planes that I was going to have to take the middle anyways. So I actually took the mission secondary and just effectively plopped my army down in the middle behind terrain and just kind of sent out sorties to harass and just keep him the hell away from me. And he slowly whittled me away, and I scored a lot of points. Uh, and the same that I took on orcs, and I just YOLO to the other side and Wazboom blasted Wazboom big monkey jets, literally killed most of my army flying back and forth, murdering me, and I was overrun, so I was able to just sit on his side and deny points while scoring points. So those games were very, very difficult. Marine, I played Sam with Blood Angels. He played a really, really good game, but I just think Drakari does so well into Marine. Like Marine bodies are just exactly what Drakari is made for, basically. Uh, the game against Scary and I was really. I'm actually looking into. Damn you, Ridvan! You're making me think about new Drakari lists because he played Artisans of Flesh, which is the -1 damage,
Hmm.
and it was so annoying to kill Talos and even the Rax when you're -1 damage on them, and my army's made of 2 damage. Uh, getting those only doing 1 damage with the 5 feel no pain, it really felt strong. It did. It felt like way stronger than it was actually the smaller guys too, like Rax and stuff felt just so annoying to kill that I liked it a lot. He played really well. Scari's a good guy also. He pumped up my sales game one, and then I played Sergey with Grey Knights in the finals, and I had the advantage there just because I played Vital Intelligence, which is literally Drakari's best mission in the book. So I was able to just kind of slowly take the board. He did really, really well. I was very worried when we first started because they played it player plays terrain, but you only took half. They divided instead of dividing the board diagonally, for vital, they divided in table halves. So my two left-hand objectives that I would go to, he just made absolutely no terrain around those, and was just like, "Would you like to take those?" And I'm like, "I'm gonna pass on getting murdered every time I walk to the top." So it became a bottom left game and then popped out. And the thing is that slowly but surely, I just have more stuff. So as long as I can hide enough, I'm able to eventually. The game was like super close, super close, super close. And then he ran out of stuff and I had more stuff.
Did you have any difficulty screening against the Dread Knights or anything? They put out supreme firepower into armies
Right.
like Drakari.
I I I spent a lot of time like making waiting on moves, so that I was boxing out like basically my my backboard edge and everything else. So it and I had my terrain kind of set up so that if he anywhere he would deep strike, he would just get bad angles on it. So and until then, I basically didn't move out until I could kill 2 Dread Knights to or at least engage them. So I was able to put down 2 Dread Knights when I finally made my move into him. So then he didn't have as much option on that. So and I was looking for he had one. He only had 2 guys with gate, so I killed one of them and then grabbed some stuff. So then I was able to not have it. It just as soon as if he gets back into my back, that's just such a dumpster fire because they just tell every little rack and everybody else that's trying to take my objective just gets murdered. So I have to really screen the entire game. It's just paying patient though. I think a lot of people in a lot of games like that push in too quickly. Just go in and then with gate and shunt, they can just be somewhere else. So if you push in too much, all of a sudden you're just standing in the middle. So it's really hard. You have to say it again in French. I cannot say anything in French. S'il vous plaît. There you go. Give me some French, Richard. Help me out with the French Canadian here.
You got to say it with an accent, the French Canadian accent. Does Hughes over there speak French
A little bit, I think.
a little bit?
Or
Okay.
he just knows no French, but knows a couple random French sayings, and he keeps randomly spurting them out to pretend that he does.
Well, congrats on the victory. Well played. Another masterclass of the Drukari. And
Ooh,
you've taken down every other Art of War coach who wants to play Drukari, and you've made yourself the top voice there.
that's my whole thing. I have to archon it up. I have to make supremacy.
But there are several other events that happened this weekend, including the Super Major SoCal Open. And wow, what an event that was. Frontline was streaming that. We had Adam Camilleri from Art of War. He was co hosting the stream, did an amazing job on there. And some of those games were pretty damn brutal, especially the Orc games. I don't know if anybody else watched the final, but everybody at the stream house was sitting in front of the TV watching it. And as we saw the plan, Sean's going to go for the trap play. He's going to tag as many Venoms into the mech guns as possible. No fallback. He's going to actually make this a game. And then when that plan completely collapsed at the last moment,
Well, also, did you hear what he was talking about? Sean actually was saying that he goes, I was midway into my plan until I realized that the mech guns are vehicles, and Morvane's Agonizer does not work on vehicles. Only regular the witch grab works on vehicles. He was like, I
but he
was
had
like,
the opportunities. Like he's got to
oh
go for
yeah,
something. If he just sits there with the Venoms, they're just insta dead, and his army gets picked over the course of 2-3 turns. But he went for the bold plays. It did not work, and man, is an orc shooting phase against MSU Drukari absolutely devastating. I
it,
have
it,
never seen anything like that.
it was
Where
just gone. I mean, the thing is those
like
are
3 minutes left.
T5 6 wound vehicles just getting punked, and then you
He,
have
it's like plus 14 to hit. And it's like I don't care how many minuses you have,
right.
it just does not matter.
You're like, you say you're -1, I'm +14. Let me see. I'm pretty sure I'm still +1. That's seems good. The but just it was and the thing is about that. We talked a little bit about that. Morcelli and I was talking a lot about that. Is that army what do they do? You know what I'm saying? Like right now, besides, I mean, I won't, guys, I won't go into a flyer rant. Just we all know I do not feel kindly about flyers, the mechanic itself. So those obviously have to have something done. But what do you do with buggies? Are we just pointing buggies? Period. I mean, and is it only because I actually don't think that the scrap jets are a big problem. I don't mind. I mean, it's not like I want. I don't know if they're underpriced or not, but I don't mind things that I can stay out of line of sight of and I can use tactics against. But I feel like when you have supreme indirect, I mean, you go back to the days of leaf blower and stuff like that. Anytime you don't have, like, I feel like my skill can do anything about your shooting at me, then I think it becomes a little bit of a problem.
So he only took 3 individual swig buggies, I believe. So it wasn't the crazy 9 indirect platforms plus all the
I'm
flyers.
just talking about in general, not for the
Yeah,
not even the SoCal itself, but
yeah.
just
In general, I think they should do a couple things. First of all, Orcs as a book is completely just it. It has a couple like basically a core of a very strong build, and then the rest of the codex is pretty trash. They need to at the same time that they nerf the buggies, which I think they're just too cheap, honestly. They could go with restricting the number of them that you could take because the potential of taking 9 of the different types
if you
is
just
kind of.
didn't, I mean, if you didn't take them as squadrons, I don't think they're anything.
I don't think that changes because if you looked at Logan's list that just annihilated Sean, he was taking pretty much one. He was taking solo mans. So changing the data sheet down to I can instead of being able to take 3 in a unit to just 1, it wouldn't even change his list, really.
I mean,
So I don't
flyers
think
are a
that's.
problem.
I think it's just they're way too cheap, and I think Speedwaugh is a major problem. I don't think the extra AP should last for 2 turns. That should probably be only 1 turn, and then because AP3 indirect is just absurd.
Yeah.
That
I mean, just
doesn't.
you gotta even the dumb guns though. Everything getting AP,
And then the
even
planes are undercosted.
yeah.
They're
I
just
mean,
straight up
the planes are just the
attack on.
planes are period a problem. The planes have always been a problem. You got me you're triggering me up for another Brad Flyer rant now, Rich. Rich Richard Siegler just pushing my button. I just you have to change the mechanic or we have to just again they're just going to point them out of playability. That's literally been the answer to flyers on that. But
Yeah,
like
the Elder
with
ones are absurdly expensive now.
right. And the thing they just that's all they've ever done though. And that the thing is right now with the orcs, you pop Speedwalk and even your dump, all your shots, even putting AP1 on, volume of shots is just a big deal. You know what I mean? Because you're hitting, hitting +1, AP on everything, real AP on all the other guns. You know what I mean? You've got AP2 on like or better on like everything the Wasboom Blasta fires. You know what I mean? That stuff's just crazy. You're 36 shots actually more because you're in Speedwalk from the Docket Jet. You know what I mean? You're just putting out a silly amount of fire for crazily low cost.
120 points.
Yeah, it's just nuts. You're just like, what? You just have people going,
Here's
that
all this
can't be.
Street 6 AP2. Be a shame if your T3 army just got picked up instantly. Plus a million to hit.
Yeah, you're like, hey, how many shots do you have? You're like, 40? What? You're just like, what?
I agree with Aloysius though. Flyers should start the game in reserve. I think that would be just a chain. If we were going after the core mechanic of flyers, that's the first thing that I would propose. There's there's supposed to be air support. They come in over the course of the game to help out your army. If you take away the alpha strike potential of them, that would be massive. Um,
I love I have a blah, I can't talk apparently. Canada took away my speech privileges. I agree on the captain that I agree that we have to buff the lower, but I think until you do something about flyers in general, um, you have to do something there because of the fact that the flyers have such a bad mechanic with that we're always going to have some issues with that because you can't buff people enough to make you know move blocking ridiculously fire cheap fire bases not a problem.
it's because they ignore the core mechanic of defense, which is terrain.
Right.
If you have things like indirect fire and planes that ignore that, they need to be priced appropriately. And once you start, the reason we don't see planes in every single faction, there are some that have good planes, like Dark Angels. The Dark Town is a very good plane. It's just very pricey for what it gives you overall. And Marines as a whole army aren't very cheap. So once you start throwing in a couple planes, same with the Necrons, the Doom Scythe.
Yeah.
It has a strong profile. It just doesn't have extra layers of rules on top of it. For the Arc ones, they get access to Speedwaugh, the freebooters buffs. They just become insane. And
Ramshackle minus
they're
one damage on there. It's just huge.
ramshack. Yeah, they're surrounded by a bunch of ramshackle vehicles as well, so there's no good targets. And then the AdMech planes, the Mars ones are actually strong. It's because they get access to Canticles and the Doctrinas at the same time. So you can pop turn one, pop double defensive mechanics, and keep them alive. So that guaranteed you get 2 turns of shooting them, which is yet generally enough to take care of your opponent's ways to deal with flyers, and then they just exist the whole game. So I think those stand out as the two problems right now because they get extra layers of rules, unlike some of the other flyers in the game. But flyers as a mechanic, I think they need to just address in general because nobody enjoys playing against a bunch of flyers.
it's,
It
it's,
is
it's the non-interactivity of it.
yeah, exactly. Um, but I definitely agree with Captain Athenos over there about flyers being the the keystone of the issue, but also the fact that if you put them in their own detachment, they were in their own detachment, and it was extremely abused in the previous edition. So they'd have to price that detachment. Maybe you can only take 2 planes, and it's like 3 4 CP.
You have to change the fire mechanic. You know what? I'm going to go to the super chat here. Matt came in. Matt, oh, thank you. Not to poke Brad, but is there a way to reach a happy medium between useless, black stars, etc., and oppressive orcs AdMac rules for flyers? Yes, 100%. The problem is we need to change the flyer mechanic. The flyers need to be able to be, and this is completely my opinion. If I was going to change it right now and I had the power, I would change it so that I could interact with flyers. I would either be able to just straight up interact them or they just don't count. You know what I mean? The fact that they don't follow, just as Richard was talking about, they don't follow the rules with it. You know what I mean? Because I can hide behind your fire. I can use you know what I mean? You see, like a great game of 40K is both players trying to figure out exactly how far you can move and see and setting up these lines of fire and setting up your moves for the next turn. Flyers just ignore all of that. You just derp up and fly over and put a wing over. They see everywhere, because they can fire, they can do line of sight off anywhere off that plane. So a lot of these things would be great if the flyer mechanic was fixed because right now they GW keeps pointing out all of these flyers and a lot of them just don't have enough volume for the cost. So these right now it wouldn't be as oppressive if we just had better flyer rules. Maybe if you're fired off the base. I mean, we had old school flyers, you know what I mean, when you used to have firing arcs off where the guns were and stuff like that. I don't think you have to bring that back, but I think maybe firing up the base um, not being and being able to be interacted with. I think that you could reach a very happy medium but we have to change the fire mechanic for me. I like basically if Siegs brings something that respects everything, he brings a chicken, you know what I mean, which has a decent firing thing, and it has to respect terrain, has to set up arcs and stuff like that. It can be underpriced, and you can play around it. I can't play around a plane. It's very, very difficult because it's just I can't block the whole board. And if you can just dip a plane over, same thing with the indirect, just like Siegs was saying earlier. That's if we fix that, then yes, 100% you could get a happy medium with some of these gunboats because having an underpriced thing, eventually, hopefully, they all get fixed. But like having one underpriced tank vehicle thing doesn't make an army OP because you can play around it. You can do things to it. You can interact with it. Having a non-interactive vehicle that's too cheap and puts out an oppressive amount of firepower is the problem on that.
The problem with flyers consistently is they have extremely efficient firepower and very little downside. I feel like as a whole, obviously they can't do that in the middle of an edition, but really flyers should be support pieces that do a particular role. I would really like flyers to shift to be a support piece that helps you get units into the fight more efficiently and quicker. Stuff like that,
Like the
like
old drop offs and stuff.
yeah, like the AdMech flyer has a really cool rule with the combined landing. It's just it was executed pretty poorly because I don't think they really tested it at all. But if they rewrote that as an actual rule that could work, that would be a really interesting mechanic. You know, you force your opponent to screen, then you know you could delay a turn, see if they still have extra screen. Like it creates an interesting decision tree between the two players. Whereas I just show up with my 3 Stratoraptors and I just blow things away, and that there's no decisions there. I'm just killing stuff.
Yeah, you can't
That
do anything about it. You're literally your
is
wingspan's so big that I can't hide effectively unless I use like my entire army, and I can only make you go to not go to certain places, and you move block me. Also, real quick, the wogs were significantly impressive at stud. Thank you very much.
in eighth edition, it was the Eldar planes with all their firepower, and
And
then you had Iron Hand planes at the end. It's just they have so many guns and they're too cheap. That has been their consistent problem. Instead of making planes support pieces that are supposed to enhance the play style of your army, instead they just kill things really efficiently, and that is extremely boring. And it just goes to show that I don't think they put much testing into this type of stuff. Honestly, like who would not test the Orc Codex and put a bunch of flyers on there and just like, hey, how does this go? Oh, it's actually silly that I have a 120 point flyer that puts out 42 shots for 2 turns.
but the crazy thing about that is that might be the worst flyer. The 121 that puts on a
The
million fly.
Wesboom Jet is just crazy firepower as well.
Right.
Well, they
That's
made
what I'm
it
saying.
4 with +1 to hit access.
When you're the number 2 flyer at 120 points and 40 some flat out shots, you know what I mean? Uh, it's just it's the flyer mechanic itself, though. In all seriousness, if those had to direct shoot me, I I could play around it. You know what I mean? That I guess that's the biggest thing, and that's the biggest feel bad thing. It's the same thing with indirect. Is that indirect and flyers is you have you don't have enough ways to play around it, which becomes the issue. You know what I mean? If you're shooting me with oppressive firepower, but I can mitigate it because of terrain and blocking and everything else, and just utilize what I feel is skill level, it wouldn't feel as bad as that. I do like the question up here. If the increased supplies of flyers and indirect fire, won't Jakari just resume the oppressive win rate uncontested? I don't think so, tell you the truth, because I think they're slowly going to get nerfed. They've been getting point increases slowly but surely, and I definitely think they're going to get one when we get up here. And I think the biggest thing is that they just play really well into Marines. I actually think that they don't play as well into, even without the flyers. I think it's a super easy, good contest in AdMech. Uh,
This is an apologist, ladies and gentlemen.
I'm
Hey,
but you keep saying that AdMech is underpowered. You show your face.
they had a 48% win rate in New Orleans, Brad. All right, anyway, the real thing is, yes, there's a supreme imbalance between the top armies and the ones below that.
Yes.
Some of those have 9th edition codexes, like Necrons. Really, really poor for Necrons, unfortunately. But the biggest thing they need to do is just sit down for a weekend and, hey, let's do a rebalancing. Now, I assume that's what Chapter Approved is, but they put it into their release schedule. So we have no idea when Chapter Approved is coming out. We don't know what they're thinking. And often because it's a printed book, it's been made many months before, which means the meta they aren't reacting to the meta that actually exists.
No,
So
it's like 6 months.
that's just a problem with
It
how they do.
literally is 6 months away. Yeah.
Yeah.
Let's go
So
to Zach on his super chat because I actually think that both of us do this slightly different. Uh, Zach says, I feel you both. Thanks for the great content. Personal question. Do you build specifically to counter flyers or build a good list and hope to dodge?
do you want me to answer first?
Yeah, because I think you do this slightly
Yeah.
different than me because I'll just play. I don't dodge, but I will play around. Continue.
Yeah, I will whatever the top armies are in the game. That this is a great example is Orlando versus New Orleans, the two GW events I went to. For Orlando, I knew that it was going to be a very MSU heavy trading type of meta, so there's going to be a lot of sisters players there. There's going to be a lot of melee oriented Marines, and I knew that if I created a more efficient trading army that focused on melee, that I'd probably have a really good chance to win. So I took the Metallica build, did end up winning it, played some really close games against a lot of top lists. Now, heading into New Orleans, the meta completely changed. Orcs had been well tested at this point, and everybody knew how silly their firepower was. So Squig Buggies, planes, and I played a couple test games, and my AdMech got absolutely tabled, just annihilated over for 2 turns. And so I knew I had to do something different. So I was not going to try and just dodge that. Yeah, there's probably only going to be 2 or 3 orc players who are, possibly able to beat me at New Orleans, but I wasn't going to take that risk. I ended up playing Mark, so I'm glad I changed my list. But I went ahead and brought in the planes. I was like, what is the best thing that AdMech can do into
Much to my chagrin.
-1 damage, -1 to hit planes, chaff launchers on there, and extra defensive mechanics from Mars. So switch from Metallica to Mars, put the planes in, and focus more on firepower. And that also paid dividends in that particular meta. So whatever the top armies are, I am particularly tailing to try and deal with them, especially if I know like top players are going to be playing it.
I play a little more all around than Six does on this. I just try to make my armies a little more versatile. I'm weird about the fact that I want to not have any bad matches, so I think I don't counter into the top as much. But the thing is with I also just accept certain things to be there, and I hope to be able to play the mission around them. That's why I bring so much garbage. I bring so much MSU nonsense because I still think that I always have a chance to play, even if like things, for instance, flyers. I feel like if, for instance, playing Drakari, if I take my army to play against flyers, I think the army gets 1,000% worse against everything else. So I just don't want to nerf my army against the rest of the field to have a mediocre answer to flyers because it's not that really good of an item. Because and the thing is that the flyers strike first against anything that I could put to be good against flyers. So a good player, like basically, if I bring anti-aircraft things against Sigs, he's just going to kill the anti-aircraft with his aircraft first, and then I'm just out a bunch of points, and it didn't do anything to the other games.
Yeah, to give you an example, James Kelling at New Orleans brought one of the better counters Drukhari have for the planes, which is the Talos with Heat Lances and -1 damage. They're actually pretty darn tough to kill. You have to commit a lot to do it, and if they just get a couple Heat Lances through, you're just gone. So that was very scary, and instead of sending my flyers up and trying Alpha Strike, instead I just flew them in my deployment zone back and forth and was plinking away at whatever I could. And then when he moved them close enough that they could hit me the next turn, I sent every Ruststalker out of my ruins and destroyed them all. So
Yeah,
at that point, the Flyers were safe to go into his backfield and pick everything up. So I just played a different style. I didn't suicide my planes for no reason.
yeah. So it's just tough on that. I think that you make the best army that you can possibly make into most everything, and then just try to use your skill to win. As long as you have keys, I think you just have to have enough keys to play the game. Tell you the truth. I mean, you look
Yeah.
at any of our armies on that, like literally every army that both of us play still has a lot of just other elements that can take the middle, take the board, score my rod, score your engage, whatever it is that you're trying to do your secondary. You can't just have hitters on the board. You have to have
Yeah.
things that score, that you score
I mean, you
points.
could, Brad. You could. You could just run 6 Flyers, 6 AdMech
Yeah,
Flyers, three, a bunch of Iron Striders, and then some Ranger Bricks, and be like, cool, deal with it. But obviously, you have less mission playing stuff, and so you really do need to table people because if it's a close, tight game with good terrain, it's not that easy.
yeah.
But
I actually do think the Death Guard end up. I think the Death Guard are underrated right now. By the way,
they are not. They're bad. They're so
I
bad.
don't believe you.
They're better than the Necrons, but they're right above them.
They're in the mid. They're good against a decent amount of stuff.
They're they're not good against it. They're fine. Like he's saying,
They're
they don't have hard.
50% against everything.
Their hardest counter is AdMech. I don't know what a good Death Guard player is going to do, but it's not anything against AdMech, that's for sure. AdMech is just the hardest possible counter. And if you have a really hard counter at the top of the meta that a lot of people are running, it's hard for your army because you have to
Right.
avoid it.
Yeah,
They
that's
have
the
an
thing.
awful matchup, and then I think the Drukhari matchup is really hard because their speed is pretty poor overall. So they play fine into Marines and below there, but I think the top armies really have Death Guard's number, unfortunately. However, I think Death Guard with some points decreases that can just help have more stuff, and that'll go a long way towards keeping them in there because they have some good rules. Being able to turn off rerolls is very good, um, and
Fight last mechanics, not counting as charging
Outpost
mechanics.
Spawn is just a very good unit to have. Plague Burst Crawlers aren't bad in direct fire; they're not oppressive, that's for sure. Um,
Yeah. Let's go some super chat here. Orcs beyond these SKU lists seem to be somewhat of a mystery. Do you think the nerf the obvious stuff? There's still a comp army out there. Same for Dread Knights and GK, to be honest. Um, I've been looking at orcs kind of a bit. I think there's I'm way higher on than the Siegs is. Um, yes, I think that there's other stuff in that army. I just think that the the stuff with the Speedwaagh is so ridiculously better than anything else that no one's looked into it enough.
I mean, people like Rich Gilden have been doing like decently well with not spamming buggies. They'll take a couple buggies, but it's not buggies plus planes as the list. I really think their infantry needs buffs, particularly boys.
There's just no
Snap
reason to take boys. That's the problem.
exactly. They didn't receive a lot of buffs, and their data sheet isn't particularly good for its points. So honestly, I think they need at the same time that the buggies and the planes get a nerf, orcs should get points decreases at the exact same time for a lot of their infantry. I want to see the infantry boys builds.
I mean, I
Um,
would love to. I'm super excited about Storm Boys, Commandos, having boys, Truck Boys. All those are very, very interesting, but they're not even close to the power. So if you're a competitive player and you're playing orcs, obviously you're going to play, you know what I mean, what is laughably better. And it's not even a question on that. You can play
internal balance of the book is completely off, which
100%.
testing was not very well done. I'll tell you that.
So, Dread Knights, I actually don't think will be touched. To tell you the truth, I don't think the Dread Knights are. I might be completely unpopular opinion. I don't think the Dread Knights are that far off if from point cost. I think Grey Knights are. I think Grey Knights should actually be somewhere near what should be the new medium. You know what I mean? I think that the power level of armies should be Grey Knights. If the power level of if every army was Grey Knight power level, I think that the game would be in a very good meta, in
It's
my
a power
opinion.
level of a particular build, though. Grey Knights have awful internal balance as well.
Well, they only
Um,
have a couple data sheets. Granted, there's one in Grey Knight build. Like
yep,
literally every Grey Knight army you see is 1850 exactly the same, season to taste, whether you want a fifth Dread Knight or something else.
yeah.
Man.
Their internal balance, yeah. I mean, the problem is with their data sheets, but you can only do so many things with a basic
But I give you
something.
that. It's just my thing is that the power of the army though, because it doesn't feel that Grey Knights for me. I feel that Grey Knights aren't oppressive in anything, but they also can play anything. And I feel like if you're never going to get a perfect balance in this game, but I feel
They,
if more of the armies were
I,
that way. Go ahead. Sorry.
I think they are oppressive into a lot of the T3 armies out there.
You think so on that?
100%. I mean, I got to watch John get tabled several times by Dread Knights with his sisters, and you'd think sisters with all their anti psychic would actually be good, but Grey Knights don't need their psychic powers. You can just throw them in the
Oh, they're a
trash.
bonus. I don't even. I'm not going to lie when I play with the Grey
Infinity's the
Knights.
most essential one. Pretty much everything else is not very good or not essential. So cool. And outside of that, they just shoot a tremendous amount, and that it's that break point where you're mostly T3 army. They're going to do a lot of damage unless you can ignore AP1 and 2. If you can't, well, you're getting picked up pretty easily. And a lot of armies don't have the cheap screens that Drukari do. Because if you start running out of screens after turn 2, that's when Grey Knights get
But then they
extremely
pop. Yes, I mean like literally turns 3, 4, 5, especially against a good Grey Knight player, are oppressive. I can see if they can be oppressive because once you can go where you need to go, you shunt one, you gate another, and then you destroy an opponent's
yeah,
backfield.
you
I'll give
go
you that, but I feel
psychic and take advantage of it. It's
how about slightly worse than Grey Knights then is the bet is where we should be into the army though because it's hard though because I feel if you bring Grey Knights down a little bit, it still it still has not that many models into it. You can still trade into it with a lot of other armies.
if Dread Knights get nerfed though, they need something else, and
Well,
which
that's what I'm
means
saying. If the Dread Knights
armies
get
that surround
nerfed, that
10
army becomes meh because Dread Knights do a lot of the work with that army with their durability and their firepower.
their psychic tree just needs to be better. Unfortunately, this is just the nature of when you put out a codex and you mess up a lot of parts of it, in particular the psychic tree. Oops, there's no going back. So it's only points decreases that could help Grey Knights in the other aspects, and boy do they need it on Terminators. But I think I would rather just buff up the other armies, and hopefully that's what Chapter Approved does. But they've taken the last two Chapter Approves to basically say, if you're an army that's underpowered, enjoy keep being underpowered because we're not doing anything, and that has been a
Yeah.
major disappointment to me. That's the
Whether
big.
or either that or they nerf the crap out of somebody. You can't take the nerf
They
path
need
so
necrons
hard.
nerfs,
Yeah.
right?
They have to. They have to. You have to start raising
Nope.
people up. I think we just need to take the basically everything else. There's four. If you're going to be fair, I think the meta is the worst time, and it has been in 2 years
It is
because
awful right now. It is. It's
if you're not,
crazy.
you can play four factions and hope for the best in certain matchups.
Yeah, you basically have four or five armies at most playing for victories at pretty much every tournament, and they are some of those top armies are just stomping everybody else. And you shouldn't have to have 4 or 5 different armies accessible to you to be able to go to a tournament. You should be able to play your army and have a decent chance to compete, and it's about your decision making. You don't get tabled in turn one with a top tier army against another top tier army. That's just absurd. So I think a lot of the ninth edition books have, unfortunately, either they've had a lot of undercosted options overall, mostly Drukhari and Admech and Orcs, or they've had the problem of they only have one particular build, and as soon as we start nerfing that, they don't have a lot else. I think Grey Knights are going to fall under that tree if Dread Knights get
Sorry,
nerfed.
I had to
Uh,
start laughing because that is a real thing. In the last
yeah, they
points
literally
increase, CCBs and Chronomancers got a point increase. That was just like a
the only reason
kicking a
you
dog while it's down.
the only reason they could have nerfed those is they watched my stream games with the Silent King build and thought that was broken. Like that's and the Nightbringer went up 20 points. He's 370 points. So I think at the end of the day, they have completely messed up the internal balance of a lot of the codexes by only leaving a couple options for builds. And when you see a book that has a lot of options like Admech and Drukhari, they're also undercosted compared to the meta because they've messed up the other books. So the ninth edition's in a really bad place. It needs an immediate chapter approved. I don't.
Here's my thing though,
They should just
because chapter approved
shut
takes
it
so
down.
long.
It's
See,
just not an effective tool.
once I'm saying, we have to have electronic nerfs way more often.
Take
If
the points out of the codexes and make them only electronic. Take
you
them out.
just massage them all. John actually had this. I take credit for it, but I've been talking about it. You have to have like every 2 at max 3 months, small changes all the time to work with the meta. You can't do these big nerf hits that
There's too much
like
at once.
go to print and they also mean nothing. You know what I'm saying? You go, hey, what kind of nerf should go in 6 months from now? Well, who knows? You know what I mean?
Yeah,
You're going to be changing points on the wrong things. It's not. They're going to be irrelevant things that are going to get
makes
points.
sense.
And if we were doing electronic nerfs every 2 to 3 months, we could constantly. It could be changing just small bits, small bits, small bits, because you don't want to also nerf something into like GSC. GSC went from the #1 army to the worst army. You know what I mean? You can't have, and obviously that was also the function of the edition changing. But I'm just saying, like, you can't keep beating units to death where they're unplayable, armies to death where they're unplayable. You have to start changing small things all the time. We're even I embrace old man Brad embraces technology with this. You have to just give us small changes all the time. If you like Drukhari, for instance, you're like, okay, I'm going to take the Raider up. I'm going to put a succubus up. Witches and incubi go up a point. Did that fix it? Cool. 2 months from now, we'll slightly adjust it again. You know what I mean? And make all these armies try to get them in balance and do the same thing with raising up of armies. You know what I mean? Take a couple units, put them down. You know what I mean? Make them cheaper. Do other things, and you can keep tweaking it. Where okay, these lower armies got lifted up, higher armies got pulled down a little bit. You can't just only nerf because then everybody's going to have one attack and it's going to be a super boring game. Yeah, I mean, it just can't. You have to basically pull down the top, push up the bottom, try to get somewhere where we get a happy zone. And nothing's ever going to be perfectly balanced. You just want to feel like all armies are playable into. You don't want to feel
Yes,
like I don't have a chance. Like you go
you
to a
win on
tournament.
decisions, not because of lists.
Right.
That's what it should be. The other thing is they need to balance around every book having multiple builds, multiple viable builds. If you only are stuck with one build, you need buffs elsewhere. So orcs absolutely need buffs elsewhere. There is no denying that in my mind. But they do need nerfs on the buggy spam. I'm a full believer in that. So that's been their biggest problem is they'll nerf one thing and just leave the codex as is. And it's like, well, we didn't have a plan B in here, so awesome. We get to sit another 6 months with no hope of help. The meta is just the meta evolves so quickly that like Brad said, if you have a small rebalancing every 2-3 months, you tweak some things a couple points down, other things go up in points and need to be nerfed.
Yeah.
And at that point, it's all, none of it is just I'm doing a 20-point increase on this one unit. Because things are going down at the same time, those start becoming more viable options competing with the same things. So I fundamentally disagree with how they balance the game. It just doesn't work. It is not an effective way to balance your product. And the more things that are viable, the more viable builds overall for every faction. It doesn't just affect competitive play. It affects every single level of play. having more things that you can fight your friend with on an equal footing just makes the game a lot more
But
fun,
it also
more
means they
get
make more
people
money on that because you want to buy more of a range of
exactly.
products too. I don't
All
understand why they wouldn't want to do this. I agree with Stephen. He says he used to work where they used to balance basically monthly on it and multiplayer weekly with the app. I actually said 2 months because of the fact that it would be such a change from what their current model is. I was just hoping. But yes, you should be balancing this all the time. I don't agree that TOs can't do stuff because we already have a problem right now that we're not running one FAQ, which means that every time you go somewhere, you have slightly different rule sets. I feel if TOs start changing points, then you're going to get skews to what armies they like and everything else too. We're already playing a different game. I've played four tournaments in 5 weeks. Every single one had a different FAQ they use. So that's already very, very difficult. I would much rather have a unified game, which also, if you have a unified FAQ, unified game, you can make balance decisions much easier too, because you're everybody's playing the same game. You don't have
and
to play the same tournament. Sorry, go ahead,
it
Steve.
fits in their core philosophy too. Like if they are balancing the game, they have a philosophy for the edition and for each codex, and they want them to fit that vision. They can make the points fit that vision within a certain amount. However, they have nobody on there who actually can play this game at a high level. It's just a fact. There is no way they have anybody on there who's even semi-competent at competitive play. Now, I would love to see the Wiz team up against the freebooters list. That would just be an amazing amount of fun. I would pay money for that. That'd be like a pay-per-view live stream. That would be amazing because the product that they're putting out, it just how does it happen? Please. John and I can just put out these builds. We'll take a look at the codex for, a day at most, and we're like, all right, here's the builds that you can come up with, and we can just refine them over time. But this is what's going to be really good. This is what's a little silly. And oftentimes it doesn't take you very long at all to decide something's going to be
And
extremely silly.
this is another thing that it felt like we started off eighth edition. We got constant changes. They slowed down a little bit. Then in ninth edition, I feel like we're back to print
There's no,
only print changes. You know what I mean? So we have to change. It just has to be changed. You can't in this game. And a couple of guys have already said this in different comments on this. The game, there always will be something broken. There will always be something that can be
there doesn't have to
exploited.
be. There doesn't have
But
to
but
be.
I'm saying
Yeah.
it,
With this
it
balanced
we'll
team,
just say we'll just say it comes through. I'm saying, but if you continually balance the game, then it's
yeah.
not. You know what I mean? But
Yeah.
you just don't throw the codex out there and go, eh, let's just let this be awful for a little while. No, just
Not a little while.
slow.
Like,
Yeah,
here's 6 months of awful at
we're right.
least.
But I'm saying like even if you made small changes though, everybody would feel better. Even if didn't do a lot, you would at least feel semi appeased that they're trying each time. You know what I mean? It
Yeah.
would at least slow the army down.
The
Hey,
negativity cycle is huge right now, and it has for a couple months now at least. But everybody, it doesn't matter that you're not the most competitive player. Just you're going to be talking to your friends about 40K and whether they should, get into it. There's tons of new players coming into the community at all times. You don't want to come in and your friends are like, if you're not playing this particular build, you just don't. It's hopeless. Don't even bother. Or if you play against this build, it doesn't matter that your army has no tools for you. You're getting steamrolled. Who wants to join that game?
right. And that's the
That
that's
shouldn't
the thing. That's
exist.
where we had the problem is that it feels like the end of seventh when there was four armies that could play the game, and that was it. And we're back to at least it's faction wise now, but we have four factions that are probably going to win. And it feels if you win against them, it's mostly outskilling somebody that had an overpowered army against you. So what do you know what I mean? We have to there has to be
There has to be a
consistent. Well, that's it.
it,
It has to be consistent all the time, though. The problem is that their history, and that's why I'm so worried about these updates in November, December, whenever we're going to get them, because they've been so heavy-handed in the past that I don't want to see just armies that are at top get destroyed. You know what I mean? And then nothing gets raised up. And that's why it has to be. It has to be all the time.
the,
If we all get Warhammer Plus and they say that they'll do FAQ points monthly, every 2 months, whatever, all the time. My God, I would do that instantly. It just slowly balance the game. You don't have to perfectly balance it all the time, but you have to be making changes to what the things that are more oppressive. You know what I mean? If
my,
you think Admech and Drakari um, are too much, then give a bunch of units small nerfs. You know what I mean?
yeah,
GSC, Tau, all these other armies. Some of the armies haven't got a codex, but like especially armies that have already gotten their codex have to get raised
Necron.
up with points. Yeah, Necrons, for instance. Necron points are
Yep.
ridiculous. Also, their mechanics are ridiculous. Also, but we're not even going to that. We're just going to say points because those are the things that we can constantly update all the time
Yeah.
easily without a rewrite.
The solution here, in my opinion, is the design team, which creates the rules. That's fine. They want their in-house, design team. They've been, in Games Workshop for a while. Cool. Those people can write the rules. That's fine. They don't balance the game though. They focus on future rules, writing the books. Done. They don't do anything with points. They don't even need to worry about it. Make the fun, flavorful rules. Awesome. Then there's a separate team that should be under Games Workshop. All the testing that happens randomly, but people who, they may not even play any games, that goes away. Get rid of that. Instead, you pay an entire team. This is a balancing team. They do all the points for the new books, and they do constant updates to the points. So
Which have to be constantly. It just has to be though, dude. Because the meta changes, things play different. Let's get into Matt's super chat real quick.
Go
What if
for
the ITC released their own mission secondaries like Old Bring It Down or Titan Slayer, but focused on flyers? Can the community help? This did help hugely back when GW wasn't touching things. They had to basically go out on their own with that. And you've also got the WTC, the World Team Championships, that
it.
works with 40 other countries, and they have an FAQ of their own. The problem is again, we don't have that unified play, and you can only do so much without having points. Literally, you have to have points and internal balancing, or you're always putting a band-aid on it. Like ITC put a band-aid on a bad, like at the end of seventh edition was a dumpster fire, but they tried to fix, what I mean? They did as much as they could with that. So yes and no. You know what I mean? Yes, I think that it helps, but you're keep trying to, you have a giant wound, you cut off my arm and I'm trying to put a band-aid on it. We need to fix these things. There's core problems. And yes, justice for craft worlds. And the same thing with that. I love the thing where we're talking about I'm holding off on buying stuff. If they would have balance all the time, I would just have more stuff. I'm an avid player. I'm a 40K and I'm a just rampant bandwagon hopper. So I will play anything. I would rather, if we're more consistent with everything, I'd be more willing to purchase more things, have more models, go do more things, than just think that the problem is you buy something that's very, very good right now. There's a good chance that it's now going to be nerfed into unplayability and sit on your shelf. And you just spent hundreds of dollars on new models that got smoked as opposed to small changes all the time. I would take that too. White Dwarf just getting points every issue that you did.
Just make it electronic. It's so easy. Just
Yes.
make it electronic. Put it into your app. Make your app actually worthwhile. It gets it's all the balance changes.
You guys are so right with that. Sequel
But
just auditioning for a job with GW at this point, he'd rage quit in a month. A thousand
I like their
percent.
corporate culture. I don't like their corporate culture. I wouldn't work for them. I also, if I'm gonna put, which I'm gonna put a lot of time into making sure the game's the best possible thing it could be, I want to be listened to, and it's very clear that playtesters are not listened to. So that's why I said they have to bring it in house, and that team, whatever it wants to be called, the balancing team, they get all the control over points and balancing the game. Whereas the design team, they can focus on all the rules and look ahead.
I
So
do.
I think that's the
I
best
would
way.
like to concentrate on one of the quotes here. I do disagree on this. Changing points every month is great for competitive play, but awful for casual play. They carry my casual. They have power level for casual play also. So I don't
Yeah.
think you even have to touch that. Power levels just stay where they are, and then you internally you focus on the actual points of that for competitive. So I think it'd be fine for both. That's just my opinion, of course, though. But their sales are going. They have great the games.
They have all the money in the world.
I mean, and the thing is I don't think the game's bad. I just think that we have a tournament problem with certain factions, and I'm not going to lie. At this point with the meta, not only do I prefer team tournaments, but I think team tournaments are almost the only way to go about getting a really good tournament right now because we have some problems at the top. 5 to 8 man team tournaments are going to be the best way to ever because you pull out having playing the same stuff every time.
I mean, I love team events. Team events are amazing. And also the camaraderie of it. You're competing with your team, with your friends. And it's an amazing way to play 40K. I wish Games Workshop promoted it. Hopefully, Games Workshop will eventually do a team tournament. That would be awesome.
Yeah. I would just, I mean, I would go to Team Circuit. Team Circuit scoots around the meta too, because again, if you can, you're always, you don't have to have it always, but you're always probably going to have one or two armies that are just a little bit more OP right now. Obviously, that would change a bit if we would consistently have point changes, but we don't right now. So team tournaments are the way to get around that. You don't have to worry about playing the same thing that you're going to get smashed every time. You know what I mean?
Yeah. And what you're talking about in chat is that's what I'm mentioning with the negativity cycle. As soon as the players who play in tournaments start talking negatively to their friends, who they're going to have casual friends, it creates an entire spiral of where the community as a whole is just upset and angry, because nothing's being done. It doesn't look like any of their concerns are being addressed, and they could be very easily. So that's a huge problem because that affects the entire community as a whole, not just competitive players and tournament goers.
Yeah, I mean, I agree. I mean, the thing is we have to have more interactivity. We have to have more change. It's just, it is. I mean, right now, nobody wants to feel that they can't win. You don't have to be the best player in the world, but you want to feel like you have a chance, every time. Somebody
And
might
you
be
want fun
more.
playing your army. You want to have fun playing your army that has a lot of choices, a lot of different options. Then you can play what you want, and it's still reasonable.
Yeah, there shouldn't
And
be dead choices. I mean, like literally, we have multiple books that have just multiple dead choices.
Necrons have an entire book of dead choices.
Yeah, I mean,
It's like,
you're not wrong.
how is that not fixed? I don't understand.
My thing is on that is it's not hard. I mean, you just have to be constantly balancing. I mean, just look at the fact right now. We have so many online games that are balanced consistently all the time, whether they do it great or not.
The
There's just
standard.
fixes. Yeah, it's literally required for you to consistently balance your game. So how are we not doing that? You know what I mean? It just it blows my mind that we're not. It's just not that hard. Just constantly update the points and you can literally get stuff in a nice bell curve of everybody's a little unhappy instead of a lot of people are real unhappy. How about that?
Maybe it's only my impression of the Sigmar team, but the community, even though there's been broken things in Sigmar, I feel like their team is more on top of it and balancing it. But I'm not sure. Maybe that's just my outside opinion because I don't actually play Sigmar. But from what I see from their community, there's more positivity about the design team there and their innovations.
I agree that over update, but I don't know if there's over update. The thing is that if you had scheduled updates we'll just say every 2 months. If you had scheduled updates every 2 months, you would also have hope all the time that they're going to, that they're at least going to attempt stuff. So I think that would go a long way to the perception and how you feel about things also, though. So they don't need to do a million things, but you have to have fairly consistent points or just things just change. New books come out all the time. So yeah, I mean, yes, this meta is not great. Yeah, I don't.
The StarCraft comparison doesn't hold up because the people who created StarCraft 1 and Brood War were actually extremely smart and understood their game and what they wanted to get out of it, and they implemented it in a really interesting fashion. Now, Brood War is not 100% balanced, but the maps have been created to make it more balanced, which is kind of where we're heading in 40K right now, where player plays terrain, trying to use player plays terrain to help with the balance, and that started to help during the summer. And then they released a bunch of books with some undercosted flyers and indirect fire that's oppressive, and that just doesn't care about terrain. So that I think that's why the problem has been exacerbated over the past 2 months or so. Is progressively there's been a meta shift towards more firepower, and especially the firepower that doesn't care about terrain,
Yeah,
and that's the issue even more feel bads.
yeah. The thing is you hit it right on the head, Six, because if you
That's
can't,
what makes
if I feel like I can't use any of my player skill to stop this from happening, that's when
yeah,
it just feels oppressive because I want, I can move, I can hide, I can place my terrain a certain way, and if you don't care about any of that, it feels like I can't use any skill to overcome what you're doing.
yeah. When
So
you're dying in your deployment zone, regardless, there's no defensive mechanics that can help you out. What is going on?
yeah, I'm not gonna lie, I wish we weren't a little too negative today on 40K
I think
today,
we
but
have to
yeah,
be. I think it's
it's true.
reached a point. We've tried to be positive over the past couple months, and still interest people in the game and come on in. You can still have player skill. At this point, it is just there is a fundamental problem in the game right now with a couple lists and particular units, and it's not going to go away. We have to be negative about it at this point in order to force changes. This is absurd. This is the point where we have to say enough is enough. Make the game changes, or there's just going to be a constant negativity cycle about your game for the next couple months until we get chapter approved, and that should be unacceptable to them.
Yeah, I agree. Tell me what we got going on this week, Six. Give me some positive mojo here.
Okay. So we do have some interesting stream games coming up. First of all, I'm going to be playing against Mr. Mark Perry and his orcs tomorrow. I'm bringing out the Custodes, and Custodes don't instantly die to that orc list. I think you absolutely have to run the Vexilla, but I'm going to be trying out a list. I've got the Telemons in there. I've got some bikes. I've got a double bike captain as well. Drop Trajan in favor of a second bike. And we'll see how it does against Mark's list. Mark is tried and true using all the orc shenanigans, but I think Custodes actually have a decent matchup. Shadow Keepers really helps there, so we're going to put that on stream on YouTube. And then on Thursday, we have Nick playing his Drukhari into John's brand new Leviathan Tyranids. John's super excited about the Tyranid rules, thinks they have dramatically increased in power, and I agree as well. The Leviathan rules are very strong, and we're going to see them up against Drukhari.
Nice.
And then finally, we have a coaching match in the War Room, and that is going to be Nick playing his Grey Knights up against Jack playing Blood Angels, which is a rematch of a Crucible semifinals game, or no, finals game.
I just say finals game.
That should be a really interesting game. They had a very, very close, tight game, and Nick wants to help recreate that in the coaching match. So nice. I'm excited to see all this in action.
Let's get a super chat before we take off, Six.
Yeah.
So we got Stu in here. I'm really new to 40K, and I really like the Tyranids. A huge fan of the Zerg, as well you should. Any advice for a new player trying to avoid common pitfalls? Take enough stuff to take the game. We were kind of talking about that earlier. You need to score points. So you need to score secondaries. You need to have enough units that can do things. You need your hitter units. You need Hive Guard. You need your Gene Stealers. But you also need things that do secondaries, do retrieve Octarius data, take your engages, take your objectives and stuff like that. So make sure that when you're looking at an army, a common mistake I see in any army is people have just their bang units, their units that do damage, and they don't have things that are going to score their mission. They don't have their things that can do the engage. They don't have something they're willing to throw away in the middle to get the direct assault, to get the stranglehold and stuff like that. You have to have enough things to play the game. You'll see how almost all top lists have, you can just see what they're doing with that list. You know what I mean? Certain things have certain functions. This is how I'm going to score. So I think that's one of the pitfalls on that. Don't avoid that. What do you got on that, Steve? What do you got to end with that? Give me some wisdom.
Yeah, welcome, Stu. So absolutely agree with what Brad was saying. To give you the analogy for StarCraft, you need your drones, you need your overlords, you need your queens, you need all of your support pieces, the defiler, all that stuff. And in the case of 40K, those are your mission playing tools. Tyranids are actually one of those factions that doesn't have a codex that has very good secondary play. They can do engage in all fronts extremely well. They can do to the last, or they can end up going for something like grind them down if you're going to play more of a defensive style. And they can also do raise the banners or retrieve Octarius data very well. They have psychic secondaries which are inbuilt into their very powerful characters, like the Swarmlord. You can go send a psychic character up, get that whatever it's called, mind control, whatever the power in the center of the board is, where you get the power off and you get some points for it, up to a cap of 12. You can go ahead and double move that back with the Swarmlord and protect it turn after turn. So they have a lot of really good.
Lictors are an infantry unit, so you can do rods with them.
Exactly. So build towards your secondaries, have that locked up, and then Tyranids on top of that have amazing speed and ability, whether you're playing Kraken or the Leviathan build, which can turn units into Kraken, and the Swarmlord for the double moving. You can take down primary extremely well. Leviathan also have a strat now to turn a unit into OBSEC. It's amazing on things like Sky Slasher Storms, which you're going to see a lot more, in my opinion. And you can contest primary very well. So at the same time, you're maxing your secondaries and you're denying opponent primary while keeping yours at a stable position. Tyranids are actually a very strong army. They have a lot of tools. They don't have the best defense in the game, So you have to play very careful, and they play better on higher terrain. But if you watch any of the games John Lennon plays or Alex McDougall or any of the other top Tyranid players, it's all about making really efficient trades over the course of the game and guaranteeing you get those secondary points while denying opponents primary. That's how Tyranids play. They do it extremely well, and they're very hard to beat for some armies. Even a good army like Sisters of Battle actually kind of has a really tough matchup into Tyranids. So definitely check out the Leviathan game that John's going to be playing this week.
It's gonna put some beats on. Thanks everybody for hanging out with us. Really appreciate, especially the super chats. We really appreciate you helping us out, putting out that more content.
Yeah, give
Hopefully,
us a like. Tell us what you thought about it in the comments below.
yes, please. So everybody, Siegs, thanks for being Siegs. Thanks
Cheers.
for hanging
See
out
you
with us,
next time.
everyone.